Tango Tango Papa 2130, April 28th, 2023.
Have we seen the actual reality of a monstrous crime? Or merely an illusion, the product of a tortured brain?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tom Wiles here with you, coming to you from home. So I got home, I guess it was Saturday morning, about 3:30 a.m. And so I've been home a couple of days now, or a little over a couple of days actually. And so I go back to work Thursday. So I got one more day at home tomorrow, then back to work. Now, this last time I was out, it was a little bit over 3 weeks or so, and things actually got quite slow. The number of loads that I pulled were rather reduced, and it was mostly caused by just slow freight. So the freight seems to have slowed down considerably. So I ended up doing a lot of sitting, kind of in between loads. And that really hasn't happened for quite some time. The last time I kind of remember it happening where I ended up sitting a fairly substantial amount was back in, I think it was in 2008, after the great financial crisis kicked off. There was a period of time where freight slowed down. Now, I didn't keep any records of it at that point, so I don't, I don't really know how much I had to end up sitting. But obviously, I made it through that point, and I'll make it through this. I did. Now, whenever I bought the pickup back in August of last year, I did go ahead and finance it, even though I could have paid, kind of paid cash for it, but I did go ahead and finance it. And then I had the idea, well, I'll just pay more on it and pay it, have it paid off basically, like March or April of 2024. But after, I don't know, I kind of debated back and forth, and then once that Silicon Valley Bank, it did the collapse, and then I guess that right after that, there's a Signature Bank out of New York City collapsed, and then Credit Suisse, obviously from Switzerland, or collapsed or whatever, or almost collapsed, had to be bought out. After that, I decided, I'm going to go ahead and just pay this off. I don't think there's any problem with my bank, but at the same time, I decided I would just go ahead and pay it off, and so that's what I did. So I was able to pay it off, and so now I'm waiting for them to. They'll send me the title. So all things being equal, I will save even paying that off, that loan off within a year's time. It probably would have cost me a couple of $1,000 extra in interest, and so by paying it off, obviously I'm skipping the interest that I would have paid otherwise to the bank that made the loan. So and then otherwise, I just plan on continuing to work and just kind of save the money. And financially, I should come out I should have come out the same. So, but even now this slowdown in loads may obviously that will affect my income because I am paid by the load. If I'm sitting, then I'm not making any money. If I'm not, because I get paid per mile. But even if things slow down and they stay slowed down, I'm going to survive one way or the other because I'm out of debt. Now I do use like a credit card. I do go ahead and use a credit card, and I've talked about that before. Sort of run everything through the credit card, and then pay it off at the end of the month. And so I'll continue to do that. But that's pretty easy. I'm not carrying a balance, but otherwise I have no other debt, and so what I intend to do is, of course I've got ongoing bills like utility bills and stuff like that. But those don't amount to a whole lot. So my biggest expense is eating out, as I'm spending usually I'd say about roughly on average about $50 a day, which is kind of expensive to eat out in restaurants. But then that's usually eating twice a day. Sometimes it can be a little more than that, sometimes a little bit less, but it does add up. And so I figure as long as I stay relatively busy and and I'm able to kind of pay my bills and what have you, the bills that I do have, and then hopefully even save some money on top of that, then it's worthwhile. It's certainly worthwhile for me to keep working. Now if it gets to the point where it costs me money to work, that's a different story, but, we're not there yet. What's happened with the trucking business is when the virus hit, of course, the government was sending out all the money to people, and they were, all of a sudden people were ordering this and ordering that, and they were spending money on all kinds of things. And that increased the demand for trucking, for things being moved around. And so trucking companies responded by trying to increase their capacity, and not only large trucking companies, but of course you always have a lot of little mom and pop type things, and like single owner operators, or like a really small trucking company with just a few trucks or whatever. And so those sorts of things ramped up pretty quickly, and then so now that you can think of that all that money moving through the system from the government sending out the money, you can think of that as a sort of a giant bubble or a bulge, sort of going through a garden hose or a snake. The snake eats its meal, and then it's got this bulge that's sort of traveling down its digestive system. So we're past the bulge, and now we're on the back side of it, and so there's this quote-unquote overcapacity in the trucking business. So we have overcapacity, and what has to happen is that the capacity will have to shrink, and this is just plain survival of the fittest economics. The overcapacity will have to shrink in order to accommodate whatever demand that still remains. And so that is actually happening right now. So the way that works, there's going to be companies that simply go out of business because they can't, they can't deal with, the kind of the post, I guess you could say post-COVID or post whatever environment. And so, and of course the big killer is debt, especially, trucking companies that have debt, or any company that has debt, or even individuals with debt. Debt is a killer. You don't want to be in debt. You want to be debt free, or at least be in a position like I was, where when I did finance the pickup last August, I could have simply paid it off right then and paid cash for it. But I determined that it was better to go ahead and I finance it with, and I had the money that I could pay it off at any point. So that's, if you can be in that position, then that's obviously ideal, the ideal position to be in. But generally speaking, you do not want to be in debt, unless you can, have the cash to just pay it off if need be. So, in any case, so a lot of these companies are going out of business right now, and that will continue. And then, like I say, the capacity is going to end up kind of shrinking back down, and then I think after that we'll return to a more normal time. Now, of course, the company that I work for is debt-free. It's a privately held corporation. It's debt-free. That's one of the things that they tout right on their website. So and they have the entire 18 years that I've worked there, or worked for them. So, that's kind of a big deal, because then, they're in a pretty good position. Now, of course, they could still find themselves in a position where they would have to, cut costs potentially if they had to, or even shrink their fleet if they really had to. But since they're debt free, they don't really, they don't have a, payment structure that's sort of pushing them along. I guess, just in the past few days, Bed Bath & Beyond they decided that we're just closing our doors. That's it. We're done. They filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and so that no more Bed Bath & Beyond. And, it's like, they had this last year, they had $7 billion worth of revenue. I don't know how many stores that they still had, but at the same time, they still didn't have enough. And of course, the big problem with Bed Bath & Beyond, as with a lot of companies, including a lot of retail companies, is that they had just all kinds of debt. They love to call it leverage. Oh, well, we're highly leveraged, like that's something smart, No, it's not. You don't want to be leveraged. That's just it's just a euphemistic way of saying, calling something debt, calling debt and make it sound like something really positive. Because if you're really, if you're not in a position where you can pay something off, then, you're kind of maybe in trouble. And especially if the debt payments are very big. And of course, a lot of things that people would borrow money on now are the house payments have been pretty big, and then the vehicle payments could be pretty big. So you really want to be in a position where your expenses are small enough where you can, if the worst happens, then you've got a plan B and a plan C. You should be able to get by. So. And you don't want to be in a position where you're just living paycheck to paycheck. You don't want to do that. And I know a lot of people do it, but just because everybody seems to do that, that doesn't make it. It's not really a wise move, because then something really goes wrong. Then you can just kind of fall like a bunch of dominoes being knocked over. Because stuff happens with people. People not only can get laid off, but they can end up with all kinds of problems, especially families. That applies to, where you have multiple people in a household. Things can go haywire and, you got problems. So anyway, I'm going to, survive. They've already, the asset manager called me this morning or this afternoon and told me that he had, the load it picks up early. I'll pick it up early Thursday morning. And then that delivers to Commerce City, Colorado, which that's a suburb of Denver. It delivers at 11 p.m. Mountain Time on the 28th. So essentially Friday evening is when it delivers. So should be able, it's like 800 miles, should be able to do that with it because like I say, I plan on picking the load up early. It looks like it's first come, first serve. Pick the load up early on Thursday and then drive part of the way to the Denver area, part way, and stop somewhere and then take a break and then drive the rest of the way, drive the remainder and then try to time it so that I get there, maybe an hour or two before the appointment time. Now, the only downside with delivering, that late, because it's probably going to be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when the load's unloaded, delivering that late, the problem is going to be, where am I going to park at after the fact? Because the truck, there's truck stops in Denver, in the Denver area, but they do, they tend to be full all the time because you have all the local guys, parking there. They're using the truck stops as a parking lot. Plus, a lot of trucks like to park, they just park, like in cities, it's always a problem if you got a truck stop right in the city or, in an urban area. They tend to fill up, but we do have my company does have a drop lot, so that I can park there if need be. So that may end up being what I need to do. And I don't remember the place I'm going to. There might potentially be some on-street parking. So once the load's unloaded, I might be able to potentially park there. So we'll see how that goes. But so in any case, not like I say, I've been ended up sitting a lot, and that can kind of get a little bit tedious after a while. You just, especially if after it's, you've been in a place for a couple of days, which that actually did happen. I was, I don't know. I did make it out to Utah this last time, and then I also made it to, I don't know, I think I was around near Albany, New York. And then, what was the name of that? Something Springs. It was kind of north of Albany or somewhere up in that area. That was in upstate New York, and I was there for a couple of days, before I finally got out of there. So it was actually, while I was there, it actually got quite warm. It was in the one place, it was like 90 degrees. Now, I think it quickly dropped after that. Since I've been home, it's struggled to get up in the low 60s here. And I think right now, if I look at my phone, I think it's actually, what's the weather here? Right now it's 47. It's supposed to get down to 46, 45, or 45, and then it's, currently it's raining. I guess it's supposed to be raining again tomorrow. So, oh well. I did, when I made it home, I did have to mow my lawn. I knew the lawn was going to be out of control because I could have mowed it when I was home the last time, but it didn't really need it per se. So I decided, and the ground was wet, and so I decided to just skip it. But I knew that this time it was going to be kind of out of control, and it was. It had really come up, and so I did go ahead and mow it, and so I kind of got that out of the way. And so from now, through the rest of the summer and the fall, every time I come home, I'm going to end up being mowed, or mowing. I'm going to end up having to mow, and most of the time, although that can be kind of a chore, most of the time it is kind of an enjoy. I do kind of enjoy it at the same time, but it's something kind of extra to do, So the thing I wanted to talk about, I was in this restaurant the other day, and I was watching. Of course, they have their TV, and I think this was close to, where was I? I think I was in Illinois, somewhere in northern Illinois, near, sort of south of Joliet. And of course, they had the TV. They had a TV on, and it was tuned to a Chicago channel, one of the local channels, and it had the news, and they had they didn't really have the volume cranked up, but you could, they just loved to have these TVs on in restaurants. They're tuned to, whatever. And in this case, it was, so they were showing that Lori Lightfoot, she's now the kind of the ex-mayor of Chicago. And I'm sorry, but she has always, just looking at her, just look at an image of her, and just watch TV sometimes with the volume turned down. It's really interesting. If you just watch with the volume turned down, and don't, and of course it's better if you got the, like closed captioning turned off, so you're not tempted to read the closed captioning. But just watch the images and watch how they change the images and what they show and how quickly they change the images. But you look at her and there's something about the now former mayor of Chicago that is kind of demonic looking. She looks bad. Kind of like dark circles under her eyes, and she just, I don't know, every time I've seen it, just any kind of a picture of her, still image, you just look at her and you can tell something's not right about her. And of course, she's had some just terrific policies for Chicago, just absolutely outrageous. Chicago is, people are moving out. Now, they move into the suburbs. Of course, a lot of the suburbs are kind of nice, but Chicago itself is, people are leaving. And with good reason, because look at all the shootings that happened there. And the riot, I guess recently there were just, kind of random riots where people, these basically hoodlums were sort of breaking into businesses and, just vandalizing everything in sight. And of course the police aren't doing anything about it. Why would people vote for somebody like that? And I just got, the obvious answer. People vote, if you, and this kind of happens in aggregate, but if you have lost your character, If your character has gone missing, let's say the character of a large group of people has gone missing, who are they going to vote for? People will, they elect demons. They literally elect people that are possessed. And I do, you can laugh or whatever and think possession's not a thing or whatever. But there are forces of evil, and there are forces of good, and there are forces of evil. And and especially in large cities, and especially Chicago, there's a serious problem there. And people, kind of the demon, if you're possessed, the demon that's worse than you are, sort of looks good. Right becomes wrong, wrong becomes right. And a lot of politicians, they're possessed, but they look better. They don't have the demonic look necessarily, but a lot of them are more adept at sort of presenting a slick, kind of a slick exterior, sort of kind of come across as really slick and charming. But they're still demonic, and whoever replaced her is, the current mayor is probably going to be just as bad or maybe even worse than she was. But that's just a good lesson. You can just take this as a good lesson. If you, and basically it goes back to the thing I love to talk about, resentment. Because we all have, we've all got character flaws, every single one of us. We all have our character flaws. And the problem is that normally, let's say a normal situation, your character flaws are sort of contained, sort of by circumstance. You could say financial circumstance, combined with a social circumstance. Typically, but it's largely governed by financial circumstances. That ends up keeping our character flaws contained. And so you can look at people that win the lottery. I've talked about this before. 50% of people that win large lottery sums, in the millions of dollars, it ends up ruining them. You come back some period of time later, maybe 2, 3, 5 years later, and they're bankrupt and their family's been destroyed. Maybe part of them are dead, divorced. All kinds of calamities befall them. And it's really because their character flaws no longer had the financial constraints constraining them, and they kind of went off the deep end. Now, that doesn't always happen. Half of the time, 50% of the time, that doesn't happen. But 50% of the time with it happening, that's a lot. That should tell you something. Sometimes it happens to people that earn money. Michael. I love to give Michael Jackson as the big example of that. He earned all that money, and but he was able to buy his own doctor and drug prescriptions and what have you. And it ended up killing him. It ended up being the death of him. So, but it's really useful to realize that your character flaws, even if you've got financial constraints, your character flaws can take you out. So they're nothing to mess around with. And the biggest problem is resentment. Resentment literally cuts you off from who you could be. It cuts you off from your natural God-given identity. And now maybe you don't believe in God. It doesn't. For my purposes here, it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not, whether you know there's a God or not. Resentment cuts you off from who you could have been. It cuts you off from your natural identity, whatever potential you had, whatever potential you have. Resentment literally separates you from that. Now the problem, resentment comes packaged with its own denial mechanism. So people will swear all day long, well, I don't hate this, I don't hate anybody. Usually you resent your parents. Those are typically the first people that you come into contact with. Children come into this world sort of they're sort of looking at their parents as if they're perfect. They sort of expect their parents to be perfect, and then of course the parents are imperfect, and they resent them. We have this as human beings, we have this proclivity to want to play God in our own minds. And so they resent their parents. And then it snowballs from there. They resent the people at school. Because the schools are terrible. They resent the schools, and they resent this, and they resent that. And people, it's kind of like the proverbial snowball that you're sort of rolling around, and it picks up more and more snow. And the thing keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there you are. And even worse, you're in denial about it. You can't admit, I didn't hate my parents. So what you want to ask yourself, if the thought, let's say you can just kind of think of your parents. Maybe your parents are still alive, maybe they're dead. It doesn't really matter. Or even if you didn't have any parents, you'd probably hate the fact you didn't have, the dad ran out or whatever, or you were adopted. You'd hate that. You'd resent that. So whatever the condition, if that thought of your parents or kind of interacting with them, if you find yourself being irritated by that, that's an indication that you resent them. That really is a good, and so it's, instead of just dismissing me right offhand, I don't hate my parents, do yourself a favor and just closely examine. What do you have to lose by closely examining whether you actually resented your parents or not? Did your parents ever upset you? Did you ever become upset towards them? And be honest about it. You have nothing to lose. Really examine that. But that literally separates you. It's not really whether you believe in God. It's whether God believes in you. Does God believe in you? And God can't believe in you as long as you're separating yourself from God's belief with resentment. So if you can get rid of the resentment, you have to really look at it, kind of go through the situation with a fine-tooth comb and realize, whether your parents were deliberately malicious or they were just inept, whatever. They did the best that they could, but regardless, you have to let go of it. And if you can do that, then you end up with, kind of coming back to the identity that you were born with. You come back to the potential that resentment was separating you from. So, in other words, you allow God to believe in you. And that's it's kind of a different thing, different way of looking at it. But just you saying, well, people will say, I believe in this or I believe in that. Well, that doesn't really matter. Do you know that? There's a giant difference between saying I believe in God and really being able to say, I know there's a God. And again, it doesn't really matter whether you believe there is or whether there is one or not. The fact is, resentment does separate you from the identity that you were born with, or the potential identity that you were born with. Once you resent, you got two wrong choices. You either go along to get along, or you try to rebel and do the opposite. Either way, you've lost. And not only that, you're empty. With resentment, and like I say, resentment comes packaged with its own denial mechanism. So it makes it easy to think, oh, I don't resent. That doesn't apply to me. I'm the exception. We all love to think that we're the exception. But it literally separates you from who you could be. But it also makes you feel empty. Ever feel empty? Lots of people talk about feeling empty and then they feel lonely and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, of course they do, because the resentment is what's separating them from, because if you can get rid of the resentment, it's been my experience getting rid of the resentment. I never feel empty. I never feel lonely. Now, of course, I have friends and I've got relatives and what have you, but I spend a great deal of time by myself, and do I feel lonely or empty or whatever? No, I don't. Absolutely not. In fact, adding to that, I feel very, very calm. Zero anxiety. When you resent, you end up sort of becoming enemies with your conscience. If you can go through that, literally realize what you're doing, realize how bad resentment is, and then really examine yourself. Anytime something comes up and it kind of, sort of makes you feel anxious about, you'll start thinking about something that happened in the long past. At that point, instead of, trying to distract yourself, it's best just to face whatever it is. Really go through the situation, examine what was my part in this? What did I do wrong? Ask yourself those questions with the serious intent of finding an answer. What you really want to, you got to really want to know what the answer is. And it's kind of an interesting thing, but if you ask yourself questions, it's my experience that if I ask myself questions, I get answers, and they may not be the answers that the danger is it may not be the answer that I want. And I think that's what prevents people from asking them, from actually being honest with themselves and asking themselves questions. Is it, they're afraid they're going to get the answer that they don't want. But you really, really need to sort of go through, when these things come up, just instead of trying to run away and distract yourself with whatever you distract yourself with, just allow this, whatever it is to catch up and just ask, say, hey, just ask yourself, what is this? Why does this make me feel uneasy? Why this make me feel anxiety? It was something that happened, God knows, it may have been years and years ago. Maybe, and it's probably something that happened with your parents or whatever. But that is essentially everyone's problem is resentment. And then all kinds of things, kind of flow out of that. Negative things. And then in order to try to, because once you have resentment, of course, you're empty, and then you also have this guilty conscience, and then you have this, and you try to drive a wedge between yourself and your conscience. You'll find other people that will agree with you that wrong is right and right is wrong, and you end up, if it goes on, you end up seeing the world completely backwards. The truth becomes the enemy. Even to the point with some people, you tell them the sky is blue and they'll argue with you. But ideally, you want to make friends with your conscience. And if you're actually able to make friends with your conscience, no more guilt, no more anxiety. And it's quite an amazing thing to be able to go, because the burden, as it were, sort of lifts. It's really amazing. The burden is lifted. Life kind of becomes a breeze. It really does. It's really an astounding thing. But if you go to my website, let's see if I can bring that up here. By the way, we're doing a video. I think I'm going to go ahead and. No, I'm not. I'm not going to put this on YouTube. I'm only going to put this on Rumble. I do have a Rumble channel. So what I'm going to do is, that's not the right one. What I'm going to do, I guess it was. No, that's it. What I'm going to do is put that up on Rumble simply because that's what I want to do right there. YouTube, the last couple of times I've posted a podcast on YouTube, it's ended up causing problems. The YouTube AI didn't like what I said, didn't like my content. So I'm just not going to do it anymore, or at least for right now. because I don't want it, it's just not worth the hassle. So I'll go ahead and put it up on Rumble. Of course, there's going to be, there will be a, whoops, what did I do that for? I'm playing with the computer. There will be the regular audio version, and that's by far, that's what most people are sort of listening to anyway. But if you want the video version, then you can, I'm going to put, like I say, I'm going to put it up on Rumble. I might try putting it up on YouTube, but I think I've already put my foot in my mouth as far as calling the former mayor of Chicago a demon. The Google AI probably won't like that. I wonder why. Because I am basically saying that all of the people in Chicago voted for, they vote for demons. So, let's see. There we go. So if you're watching the video now, I've brought up my browser with my website, and so it says Trucker Tom's Podcast at the top, and then underneath that, it says home, and then these are text links, and it says video and meditation exercise. So if you click on that, which I'm doing right now, then you'll have, there's a link to the meditation exercise right here, and so there are 3 different files, and then plus one that I did. So the 3 files, it says introduction, exercise, and discussion. Those are those are old Roy Masters MP3 files. You can either click on those and play them right on the website, or right click and download them. See, if you say save link as, it should allow you to see, like a discussion.mp3, so you can actually save those to your device or whatever, and burn them onto a CD even if you wanted to. But they're right there, introduction, exercise, and discussion. And then there's also a version here where I, kind of made the file myself. So that's also an option. So, but, if, I do believe, I can't promise the meditation is going to help everybody, but I do believe that it will help most people. And all you have to do is if you find that it helps you, stick with it. I know it's it's super easy to procrastinate. It's just super easy to just, do other things and not do that. In other words, it's super easy to be distracted. But it's absolutely worthwhile. And I'm not saying that things like entertainment or whatever are wrong. It's all in how it's just, these things are just things. Tools are tools. So there's really nothing wrong with it per se, but if you use that as a distraction, then, that's a problem. But it's really, if you can learn, kind of spend some time with this meditation, and like I say, it's up to you. If you find that it helps you, it's up to you to continue with it. So, but it's up there. Give it a try. I know I talk about it ever so often, and but it is on my website, truckertompodcast.com, and so it's there. And it certainly has helped me, no question about it. So, anyway, I think I'm going to bring this to a close. We've been going on for about roughly 50 minutes or so. So, in any case, hope everyone is having a great week. And I will catch you later. Let's see if I want to press the right button.
Remember, Trucker Tom is like Visa. He's everywhere you want to be.
Product reviews, restaurant reviews, photos, opinions, and more. Visit Trucker Tom's website at www.truckerphoto.com. You've been listening to Trucker Tom's podcast, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. All you have to do is send us an email to tom@truckerphoto.com.